Senator Ted Cruz is a licensed attorney in the state of Texas and one of our 2 U.S. senators for the state of Texas. But long before he was elected as U.S. Senator, he had quite a career as a lawyer and an advocate. He served as the Solicitor General of the state of Texas and in private practice, where he authored more than 80 U.S. Supreme Court briefs and argued 43 oral arguments, including 9 before the U.S. Supreme Court. As a graduate of Harvard Law, he also served as a law clerk on the U.S. Supreme Court for William Rehnquist. Senator Ted Cruz has won an unprecedented series of landmark national victories that include the defense and the constitutionality of the 10 Commandments monument in the state of Texas that still stand on our Texas state capitol grounds. He was also successful in defending the words "under God" in our U.S. Pledge of Allegiance. In the U.S. Senate, he's led the fight to repeal Obamacare, to secure the border, and to confirm Justice Neil Gorsuch to the U.S. Supreme Court. As a strong pro-life advocate, he has led the fight to defend life, marriage, the First Amendment, the Second Amendment, and our entire Bill of Rights. And most importantly, he's kept his promises to speak the truth and do what he said he would do. And Ted has proven that exact type of courageous conservative is what we need in the U.S. Senate to restore economic growth, defend our Constitution, and protect the values that we hold dear. Senator Cruz also showed his support earlier this year for religious freedom in the state legislature by coming to the state capitol on the day of the Save Chick-fil-A religious freedom rally at the Texas Capitol. And he continued to show his support for the Save Chick-fil-A religious freedom effort as that state bill became law during this 86th legislative session. Ted and his wife Heidi have 2 daughters, Caroline and Catherine. And I've also been made aware that he spent a few years as a visiting professor at the University of Texas School of Law. For our football fans out there today. But you know what I will say to conclude? Is that when I think about faith, family, and freedom of Texas, I think about Ted Cruz. Please welcome to the stage our U.S. Senator Ted Cruz. Thank you, Senator. Appreciate you, sir.
Well, thank you, and God bless Texas. Let me first of all say, hook 'em. And you know, we're good neighbors, but I feel really bad that we're going to send LSU home with their tail between their legs tonight. I will tell you, Steve Scalise from Louisiana, he and I have a wager. If by some tragic accident LSU wins, then I have to provide him Texas barbecue and Shiner Bock. But when Texas wins, I get gator and gumbo and a beat of beer. So I'm looking forward to Steve delivering on that wager. You know, these are crazy times. You look at what's happening in Washington. It's pretty messed up. You know, last Christmas, they canceled the nativity scene at the U.S. Capitol. It wasn't even political correctness. It was just in all of Washington they couldn't find 3 wise men or a virgin. But I want to pause to reflect on what we've accomplished together, on the victories we've seen over the last 2.5 years. I want to talk about 7 victories that we have won together for Texas, for freedom, and for the values that we share. We'll start with victory number one, which is jobs. 2017, we came together, we passed the biggest tax cut in a generation. We cut taxes on small businesses, on farmers, on ranchers. We cut taxes on working families. And we've repealed hundreds of job-killing regulations. The combination right now today, we've got the lowest unemployment in 50 years. I'm 48 years old. I have never breathed a breath on planet Earth when unemployment was as low as it is right now. The last time unemployment was this low, Neil Armstrong was taking one small step for man. Not only that, African American unemployment is the lowest ever recorded. Hispanic unemployment is the lowest ever recorded. You know, somehow we don't see that on the 6 o'clock news. Wages are going up all across this country, and the number one state in the union for wage increases is the great state of Texas. Second big victory is life. We have taken serious, significant steps forward, protecting the right to life of every human being from the moment of conception to the moment of natural death. The beginning of this administration, the United States pulled out of the Mexico City rules so that we are no longer funding organizations abroad that are providing abortions. The United States withdrew from the UN Population Control Fund so that we're no longer funding their harmful activities. And the administration ended the unconstitutional imposition of the Obamacare contraceptive mandate on religious organizations. This is a group that has long been active defending religious liberty. There were few things that illustrated just how nutty the prior administration was than their litigation against the Little Sisters of the Poor. A Catholic organization of nuns who had taken vows of poverty, who spent their entire life caring for the poor and the infirm and the elderly. The Obama administration was litigating against them, threatening to impose millions of dollars of fines if the sisters did not pay for abortion-inducing drugs and others. Now, I've pointed out more than once, a really good rule of thumb in life. If you're litigating against nuns, you've probably done something wrong. I'm telling you, this is just a reliable rule. Count on it. Any given day, wake up, okay, litigating against nuns. Check, stop that path right now. And at the start of this administration, the administration settled that case and ended the litigation against the Little Sisters of the Poor. A third victory, the Obamacare individual mandate. We came together and we repealed the Obamacare individual mandate. You know, the greatest policy disappointment of the past 2.5 years is that the Republican majorities in Congress failed to get our job done and repeal the train wreck that is Obamacare. I spent thousands of hours in 2017 and 2018 working to try to bring Republicans together to get 50 Republicans to yes. I would say it's like herding cats. Frankly, that's not fair to the cats. And we all remember the moment at 2 in the morning where we fell down by one vote. The heartbreaking moment. But even though that task is not yet finished, and I am committed to continuing the task and completing the task, we did manage to come together and repeal the individual mandate. The individual mandate fined you if you couldn't afford to get health insurance. About 6.5 million Americans every year got fined by the IRS. About 1 million of them were Texans. Of those, roughly 80% earn $50,000 a year or less. Roughly 40% earn $25,000 a year or less. So think about it for a minute. You're a single mom. You're working your fingers to the bones. You're not even making $25,000 a year. You're barely able to provide for your kids. You can't afford health insurance for them. And to add insult to injury, the IRS comes along and fines you because of that. It's what led Bill Clinton to say Obamacare was the craziest thing in the world. About the only time I ever agreed with Bill Clinton. And I'll tell you, in the Senate, when we started to take up the tax cut bill, there were only about a half dozen of us conservatives pushing to repeal the individual mandate. Most of our colleagues are like, come on now, we just tried Obamacare, we couldn't get it done, give it up, don't go anywhere near it. But we made the case publicly, we made the case privately, this is the right thing to do. And we ended up going from just a half dozen conservatives in the Senate to uniting Republicans and getting all 52 Republicans together and repealing the Obamacare individual mandate. A fourth victory: judges. Every one of us here who cherishes the Constitution and Bill of Rights, who cares about our fundamental liberties, who cares about free speech, who cares about religious liberty, who cares about the Second Amendment, the right to keep and bear arms, who cares about the 10th Amendment. It is the federal courts, it is federal judges that are at the crossroads between either upholding those rights or tearing them down. In the last 2.5 years, we have confirmed 146 new federal judges to the bench. Including 18 here in the great state of Texas. That is a legacy that is going to last for years and then decades, as we have principled constitutionalists on the bench who will uphold our rights. You know, you look at something like religious liberty. There is such an assault from the left on religious liberty. Whether it is coming after Chick-fil-A, as San Antonio City Council did, or whether it is targeting and persecuting Christians at Yale Law School. I don't know how many of y'all saw, some months ago, Yale Law School announced a new policy, a new financial aid policy, that would directly target and discriminate against Bible-believing Christians. Now, it arose from a lawyer from ADF, the Alliance Defending Freedom, was on Yale Law School's campus and was talking about the Colorado Baker case, the case that just won 5-4, a big victory for religious liberty. Now, the leftists, well, they were doing what college leftists do, stomping their foot. By the way, how many radical leftists does it take to screw in a light bulb? That's not funny! And the LGBT group at Yale, called Outlaws, it's actually a clever name, they protested, they went to the dean, they said they were traumatized, oh so traumatized. Yale has a policy, they provide financial aid to Yale students who go work in the summer at public interest law firms. They also do loan repayment for Yale graduates that go work for public interest law firms. Yale announced a new policy that said they'll continue to do that for every Yale law student unless you go work at ADF or any other organization that believes in traditional marriage and the traditional definition of a man and a woman. Explicitly carving out and discriminating against Bible-believing Christians. Well, in the Senate, I'm the chairman of the Constitution Subcommittee of the Senate Judiciary Committee, so when I saw this news, we announced in the Constitution Subcommittee an official investigation of Yale Law School into their discrimination against Christians and religious liberty. Federal law prohibits discriminating against people based on their faith. Yale takes hundreds of millions of dollars in federal taxpayer dollars each and every year. And look, I got to tell you, when we announced the investigation, the Yale administration was thoroughly dismayed. They said, "What can we do to make this go away?" I said, "It's very, very simple. End your policy and stop discriminating against Christians." And I'll tell you, Yale is the canary in the coal mine. If they get rid of it, if they're allowed to do this, we will see law school after law school after law school doing it. We've got to defend our liberties, and having principled judges on the bench is one of the critical ways we ensure that when we defend our liberties, we keep those liberties secure and safe. Fifth victory, school choice. School choice for me has been a deep and lifelong passion. I think school choice is the civil rights issue of the 21st century. The single most significant legislative victory I've had in the Senate concerns school choice. And this was during the tax cut bill. When it was on the floor, I introduced an amendment concerning college 529 savings plans. Now, 529 savings plans, they're tax advantage plans that parents and grandparents can save for the college education of their kids and grandkids. Immensely popular, about 18 million Americans use them right now. My amendment took college 529 plans, expanded them, so you can still use them for college. But now you can use them for K through 12. You can use them for public school, private school, parochial school, religious school. Your choice, up to $10,000 per child per year. Now, there was actually a bit of drama when the amendment came for a vote. At the time, we had 52 Republicans in the Senate. First one, then a second Republican voted no. So I was standing there. Susan Collins voted no. Lisa Murkowski voted no. So I was standing there with Lisa. And I was trying to make the case to her why she should switch her vote. Tim Scott, senator from South Carolina, wonderful, wonderful friend, strong school choice supporter. Tim and I together are both talking to Lisa, trying to convince her, saying, "Look, Lisa, this is your money. Why shouldn't you be able to save your money for your kids to be able to choose the best education for themselves?" So we're making this case. Behind us, Joe Manchin, Democrat from West Virginia, he walks down to the front and he votes yes. And there's an audible gasp in the well of the Senate. Now, when Lisa had voted no, the Senate floor staff had picked up the phone and called the Vice President's residence and said, "Mr. Vice President, looks like we may need you." This is 1 a.m, so the Vice President was at his residence. So the Vice President hops in the motorcade, starts heading down to the Capitol. When Joe Manchin comes down and votes yes, Senate floor staff picks up the phone. They call the Vice President's office. They say, "Mr. Vice President, turns out we don't need you. We just got Manchin." So the Vice President turns the motorcade around, begins heading back to the residence. Now Manchin goes back to his desk. And he sits at his desk, and he is surrounded by a sea of Democrats who begin beating him with sticks. Joe Biden actually comes over and gives him a back rub. And by the way, for the media fact checkers out there, that part was a joke. I could already see them pulling up C-SPAN. "Joe Biden's not there. What are you talking about?" After about 5 minutes, Manchin sheepishly walks to the front of the Senate floor and shifts his vote to a no. So the Senate floor staff picks up the phone. They call the Vice President's office. They say, Mr. Vice President, looks like we need your vote after all. They turn the motorcade around a second time. It takes about 20 minutes to get from the Naval Observatory to the Capitol. About 20 minutes later, the Vice President walks in. He takes his seat. He says, the Senate being equally divided, the ayes being 50, the nays being 50, the presiding officer votes in the affirmative. The amendment is adopted. And with that, we had the most significant federal school choice legislation in the history of the country, benefiting up to 50 million school kids all across this country. Sixth victory, Israel. Today, our embassy in Israel is in Jerusalem, the once and eternal capital of Israel. Now, there was a big battle within the Trump administration over this decision. Both the State Department and Defense Department didn't want to move the embassy. They both argued, if we move the embassy, the people who hate Israel will be really mad at us. Like they love us so much right now. I was very actively involved in this battle, and I made the case to the president, I made the case to the administration, we need to move the embassy. Remember, presidents of both parties, Republicans and Democrats, had made the promise to move the embassy. And presidents of both parties had broken that promise. And what I urged the president, I said, Mr. President, if and when we move the embassy, it will be heard and understood by our friends and by our enemies as an unequivocal statement that America stands strong, and we stand with our friends and allies, and we stand with Israel. And the day we opened the embassy was the 70th anniversary of the date of the creation of the modern state of Israel. And that day I was there in Jerusalem for the opening of the embassy. I'll tell you, there was celebration. There was literally, I've been to Jerusalem many times. I have never seen dancing in the streets. There was one older woman who was a Holocaust survivor. She showed me the tattoo on her forearm from being in a concentration camp. And she had tears coming down her face as she told me, she said, I never thought I would live to see this day. That also leads to the seventh victory. I do not think it is coincidental that the very same week we opened the embassy is also the week that the administration announced we were withdrawing from the disastrous Obama-Iranian nuclear deal. That was, I believe, the single most important national security decision made by this administration. The Ayatollah Khamenei is a religious zealot. He is a theocratic lunatic who chants death to America and death to Israel. And you know, if history teaches anything, it is that if somebody tells you they want to kill you, believe them. And at a minimum, don't give them $100 billion. Iran is the world's leading state sponsor of terrorism. There was a battle within the administration. Actually, the battle lines were the exact same as the Jerusalem embassy. It was the same battle replayed. So state and defense both argued, no, don't pull out of the agreement, stay in the Obama agreement. Once again, I made the case to the president. This agreement is disastrous. It is catastrophically foolish. And the president made the bold and the courageous decision, and we pulled out of that agreement, no longer funding the Ayatollah Khamenei. So I want to thank everyone here. Look, the men and women here, and by the way, let me say in particular, I'm so glad to see so many young people here. The victories that we have won because we have stood for principles that mattered. And we have given voice to the American people. And we have stood for what is right and true and just. That battle continues. It continues in Texas. Texas is a battleground. The left nationally has put a target on the state of Texas. They're going to spend over $100 million in Texas in 2020. And it is a battle fundamentally for who we are and what we believe. Look, young people, 50% of young people think socialism is a good idea. That collectively is a failure of all of us, every one of us. Because socialism has been a manifest disaster everywhere it's been implemented. It has led to poverty and suffering and misery and death. You know, one of the best illustrations of the consequences of socialism is the country of Venezuela. Venezuela in 1950, a lot of people don't know this, Venezuela was the fourth wealthiest country on earth. GDP per capita, America was number 1, Switzerland was number 2, New Zealand was number 3, and number 4 was Venezuela. Then Hugo Chavez and Nicolas Maduro came in with socialism, destroying that mighty country's economy, bringing that country to its knees. Today, Venezuelans are literally eating trash out of dumpsters in the alleyway. Millions are fleeing Venezuela because they can't get food. They can't get medicines. They can't get the basic things they need to live. Now, what do the 2020 Democratic presidential candidates say? Let's do more of what they're doing. That's just nuts. But let me encourage y'all. The only way we win that argument is to win that argument. The greatest enemy poverty has ever seen is the American free enterprise system. And I want to encourage y'all also to be happy warriors. You know, the left right now, they're so consumed with rage. They hate the president. It is all-consuming. It's all they can see. As conservatives, let's not respond in kind. You know, too many Republicans act like they got a stick inserted somewhere it doesn't belong. Like, just lighten up. Just have some fun. All right, a few months ago online, there's a Twitter meme someone sent out that said, Ted Cruz ate my son. So I retweeted it, said he was delicious. Like, just... Be happy, joyful warriors. Because listen, our job is very simple. We simply have to speak the truth. Our ideas work. Freedom works. Liberty works. The Constitution works. The Bill of Rights work. Their ideas don't. If you had to sell the big stinking pile of lies that they're trying to sell, you'd be angry too. All right, let me give an example of this. We talked about life. Life is one of those issues on which the Democratic Party has gotten so extreme that it is utterly unrecognizable. You know, most of us remember when Bill Clinton stood in the House of Representatives and said he wanted abortion to be safe, legal, and rare. That's no longer the position of the Democratic Party. They're not pretending to embrace anything remotely like that. The position of the Democratic Party now, without exception, of the 2020 presidential candidates is they support unlimited abortion on demand up till the moment of birth, partial birth with taxpayer funding, and no parental consent or notification. And by the way, the media tries to say, those of us who believe in life, we're the minority. You know what percent of Americans agree with that position on abortion, the position of Democrats? 9%. 91% when they see the Democrats' position say, that ain't me. And some of them are even nuttier. How many of y'all saw Ralph Northam's video? By the way, let me stop. Have you noticed that's a name the media doesn't speak anymore? It's like Ralph Northam is Voldemort. He who must not be named. Why? Well, he's a Democrat. He's the governor of Virginia. He was filmed doing a radio interview. He's also a doctor, and he was describing delivering a baby. He said he would comfort the baby, make the baby comfortable, and then he'd have a conversation with the parents about what to do with the child. What to do with the child after the child is delivered. And he was advocating, Hannah Arendt talked about the banality of evil. What's striking about this interview, I encourage you to watch it, is it appears that his heartbeat doesn't get above 60 beats per minute. He's utterly calm discussing a conversation with the parents. We have your infant child now. Should we kill it? That's the position of Democrats. This is also the same Ralph Northam whose medical school yearbook had a picture of two guys, one dressed as a Klansman and one in blackface. Remember this whole scandal, which the media amusingly called the blackface scandal. Now here's why that's amusing. Northam's first response when this came out is he said, well, yeah, he could have been one of those two guys in that picture. And he didn't know which one. That was his first response. Now the media went in this tizzy about he was saying he could have been dressed in blackface. Now listen, I get that dressing in blackface is disrespectful. I understand why people could be offended by that. I don't know that I ever knew anyone who dressed in blackface, although then the Democratic Attorney General said he dressed in blackface too. And I was like, what is it with Virginia? I mean, you guys, did you... But the media has this, look, if dressing in blackface is a hanging offense, I think every major late night comic has all done skits in blackface. They're all on ABC, NBC, CBS, on the major networks. What I found odd about the whole thing is Northam said he could have been either one of the people. Let me just say right now, if you cannot say unequivocally and with no hesitation, I have never dressed in a KKK outfit, you have no business in public office. If you think you kind of might have been a Klansman, but you can't remember, you have no business in public office. And what does it say about the media that it was never called the Klan scandal? His first answer was, yeah, I could have been that guy. But that's how extreme. And by the way, he remains governor. Media won't talk about him. That's how extreme they're getting. You remember, did any of y'all watch the first Democratic debate? You had Tweedledum and Tweedledummer. There was a moment in it that I thought was particularly unique. So on the question of life, they're all professing their fealty to be for unlimited abortion in every circumstance imaginable. And Julian Castro, a Texan, he stood up and said, I'm for taxpayer abortion, but not only that, I am for taxpayer abortion for transgendered women. Now, look, I'm going to readily admit, I have a hard time following the politically correct lexicon and understanding who's who and what's what. But to the extent I understand it, when Mr. Castro describes someone as a transgender woman, he means someone biologically male who now considers himself a woman. Now check me on this. I may not have studied hard in biology. But if you're biologically male, how exactly are you getting pregnant again? And so he's arguing for taxpayer-funded abortions for people born biologically male. And the other 9 Democrats are all standing there nodding, going, yep, that's a great idea. I don't think the writers of Saturday Night Live could have come up with that. Of course, they wouldn't, because that would involve making fun of a Democrat. But look, when one party is going nuts, we've got to respond with joy. We've got to respond with smiles. We've got to respond with love. We've got to respond with compassion. We've got to respond with truth. That's what y'all are doing, and it is why I'm proud to stand with you, and I'm proud to stand shoulder to shoulder as we fight to defend Texas as the greatest state in the Union and the United States of America as the greatest nation in the history of the world, a shining city on a hill that we are devoted to defending. Thank you.
Come on, we can do better than that for Senator Cruz. There we go.